Hi there, my name is Nicole Hebert with the Moose Show Journey to Hope team, and this is Voices of Hope.
My next question is, in your experience as a whole, how has this influenced your life? Where has this led you to now?
That's huge, because before I was a mom and before I had a mental illness, I had a very different plan for how life would go, but obviously that's not realistic. But so I started out wanting to work with kids, wanting to be a social worker who worked with like kids and parents, and like it's hard to even remember, but I was like so excited. I was absolutely baby obsessed and kid obsessed. Like I just wanted to work with them all the time, work with their parents and help them bond. And I was like, oh, how can anybody not love their baby all the time? I just want to, help people form this awesome bond and like fly away together on a rainbow. But no, as soon as I had a baby, like probably the second I had a baby, I was like, oh, okay. This is actually really hard. I was way too judgmental of other moms before I was a mom, I'll say that. And I thought that I was going to help other moms to be better parents before I was even a parent. So it was really, really naive of me. But as soon as I understood what it was like to be a mom and what it was like to be a mom with postpartum depression, it was like, no, the kids are fine. The kids are totally fine. It's the moms that we need to worry about because they're not doing okay. Like the moms are the ones who need help, and like it all stems from, like, more often than not in most families, the mom is the center, the hub of the family, and everybody else's well-being comes from how she's doing. And that's just the reality of it right now. And I can only speak to that experience because I haven't lived another experience in another type of family. But what I can say is that I learned a lot about what it is that moms need, and seeing that has really changed my career path and like my passions. And it's interesting because when you have kids, it's like every time you have a kid, your goals sort of get like set aside, or your interests kind of get set aside. But it also gives you a lot of time to think about it and to sort of correct your course a little bit. So I change my mind all the time with what I want to do with my life. My daughter asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I didn't know what to say. But the way that it sort of impacted my life as a whole is just seeing that my story and what the interests that I've developed out of that are valid, and that they're important, and that I've sort of narrowed in on what I want to do, and like the impact that I want to have by the time I leave this earth is like, I really just want to work with people on the individual level. And I used to think I wanted to work with a much bigger group and do much more in a day. But what I do now is really just like one-on-one. And every time that I feel like another mother validated by some kind of conversation that we've had, it's like, that's it. That's good. I'm good. Like, that's all I need. That's something that I can do. And like, it's really narrowed from what I thought I was going to be doing.
Do you find that more women are reaching out, or more young parents are reaching out to kind of gain either insight or support?
Yeah. I think because I'm so public with how I'm doing, and I sort of, I don't know. I talk a lot on Instagram, I talk a lot on Facebook, and the best part of my day is when people reach out to say like, oh, that really resonated with me. Or I didn't know I was the only person who felt that way. I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only woman who was struggling with being a mom. Because sometimes I'm the first person that they've heard say that it's hard.
Right. Yeah.
Really. And so I do get a lot of people reaching out, and it's awesome.
And that can be important when you do have a partner. So what was something that was helpful between you and your husband that kind of like helped you through your experience with postpartum depression and anxiety, but also continuing forward? What was something that you both found to be helpful to support one another?
I would say the biggest piece is like communication between us, and him understanding my capacity and being empathetic to that. And because most days I'm able to do very little around the house, because like today is a good day, but most days I really do very little around the house, and he has slowly kind of transformed his expectations of what he might have thought his wife would be like. And he's been kind through it all, but I'm sure that when he was, an 18-year-old boy thinking, I'm going to be working and I'm going to marry this awesome chick and she's going to be taking care of the house, like just the traditional idea that seems like it's going to be really great. And there's no fault to that. But he has been so patient and just like, I don't know what the word is, but like his expectations have just transformed as he's realized like what's realistic. And like we've split the household tasks, which is huge, because I know that when you're struggling with mental health, it's your capacity for doing anything is extremely limited. And I think the communication of that, like what I'm able to do today, what he's able to do today, so that nobody's saying like, oh, I see you didn't do the dishes, or there's none of that crap. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because that doesn't really help after a stressful day, especially if you've got two kiddos that really needed, mom time and really needed to be regulated that day. Sometimes kids, like, they're dysregulated for the whole day, whether it's one way
Exactly.
They could be off internal routine, even though their outside routine is the same. I think we deal with that a lot right now because of COVID, because we're so restricted to the diversity of days that we can have, kids not being able to go to school on and off. So it just kind of adds to that pressure a little bit of, well, today we are doing daycare and school, and tomorrow hopefully you will be going to school and I will no longer be daycare and school, but and then also being mom. So there's just so many hats that parents are putting on. But I agree that communication piece is so important, and also just knowing each other's capacities. I think so much I think we talk about roles in relationships as parents, and sometimes that can get really like separating, because we're not focusing on the needs that each other has. So like, I need you to do this because of this, and this, or this is, I reached my max per day by doing these things, and this is why. And it's so beneficial, because then we're also like allowing people in our lives to understand where we're coming from. We're also holding them accountable in ourselves, and letting them know that like we know they're doing their best too. So we're just opening the door for them to let us know what is really stressful for them and what reaches their max capacity in the day, especially.
Absolutely.
So it's just all around a great conversation, and it's not always balanced, I imagine. Do you find that that a lot of people have questions on like how to keep it balanced all the time?
Yeah, I think that people will often ask me like, how do you do this, and how do you get this done, and how do you balance like the work you're doing with your kids and stuff? And it's like, it's not at all a balancing act. It's just selective. Like, you have to just choose what you're going to do and what you're going to allow yourself not to do. Because if you think like, okay, there's 10 things that need to get done in the house, and today I only did 2, you see that as a failure. But if you can like adjust your expectations and say, I'm only going to do 2 things today, and then you do those 2 things, then that feels like a success. And so like with me and my husband, it's like, okay, sometimes we have to sort of like reassess what's realistic. And I try to do the things that he doesn't like doing, and he does the things that I don't like doing. But as far as whether or not those things get done, we just have to communicate, like, I'm not going to be able to do the dishes today. I hope they don't bother you too much, but don't expect them to be done when you get home.
Fair warning.
Yes.
So true, especially having kids. Like, you could do the dishes 3 times in one day because it just so quick, whether you're doing, crafts together or just different experiences or cooking, and it's just stuff that adds up. So it's
because I know I said I reached out to my family doctor, but from there the next step was I'm not saying this is not the manual to fixing yourself, like, because this isn't necessarily what worked for me, but where I got started, she referred me to the mental health clinic, so that's a public health system, so that was free. And I saw a maternal mental health psychiatrist there. And she was good for getting me started on medication. But she wasn't overly compassionate as far as like the counseling or therapy side of it, which is fine. And everybody has their specialty. But from there, it was like, okay, you'll be on this medication, but you should probably find a therapist. And then that was it. So then I didn't see her again. Nobody, I guess I was kind of like left, like put out in the wild. And I think that's one of the things is there's no continuous care, right? So I didn't find a therapist until, so that would have been when my daughter was 8 months, and I didn't start seeing a therapist until I had my son. So I waited 2.5 more years.
Right.
And I really, really should have had a therapist that whole time, because as soon as I did, my world changed.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't realize how huge therapy was, but as soon as I started, so I tried 2 until I found one that worked for me. And again, like it takes time, unfortunately, and that's a big part of what I do in my work as a health advocate, is trying to be that continuous care for people and not letting them procrastinate as long as I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you're okay with this, like if you want to talk a little bit more, because you don't just consult about being a parent, you also have access to different information of where they can go for like health related needs and medical needs, I imagine like pre-birth and post-birth. And so how does that kind of work with the people that you work with? Like, how do you kind of set that up for them?
Yeah, so I work with really anyone. I mean, the people who are gravitated towards me are mostly moms, but I know that like the Google search is the hardest step for a lot of people. And so when people hire me, it's like avoiding that step. And I do that research for them. And I find out exactly what they're looking for in whether it's a therapist or a specialist or a new family doctor or like anything. It could be a physiotherapist. It could be a dentist. I mean, I haven't done a dentist, but it could be anything. And then I do the research and I go through all the reviews and I vet these people until I find 3. I try to find 3 options that would be good options. I make sure that they're accepting patients. I make sure that they, they do virtual or in person or whatever they're looking for. And then I bring those 3 options to them. And I call it like a health support menu, because you can just see 3 options that are good options. And you don't have to see all the other crap, because otherwise you start and stop the process a lot, that's what I hear from people is like, I hit a roadblock and then I stop for a year. And what can happen in a year, right? Like, that's hard.
Yeah, totally. And there's so many times too where I think, everyone else's needs kind of become bigger, right? We lose focus on how we define our needs in a sense, and like you said too, even aspirations or like who you want to be or motivated by. And a lot of times too, I find even parents that I work with is I feel so disorganized on the inside, on the outside, and I just don't feel like I can initiate anything until I can organize what's happening on the inside.
Yes.
I could empathize with that, right? I could empathize.
That's huge.
And once you can do that, whether it's doing physical activity and diet as best you can, or whether it's just drinking 2 liters of water every day and journaling, or whether it's, going to therapy and which I'm always game for. I've got plenty of people in my life and people I've met in my work where they've said, we had our first kid, we didn't get any help. And we were like, why? Mm-hmm. And then our second kid came and we were just like, nope, we're both going to therapy, either together or separate, and we're going to work on ourselves so that our children can know that, we respect ourselves enough to take care of ourselves, that it's okay to work through what we need to work through so that we can be people that we want to be, and it's not necessarily about them. Because I have a lot of families too that say, like you said too, I feel like I have to say it's not their fault that I'm having such a rough day, or that they constantly feel like because, one thing doesn't happen, or maybe they hear mom and dad like talking about, oh, we got to get this done and stuff, that they feel like they're in the way. And I've heard so many times that parents are like, the moment that we did therapy, it changed because they're just authentically able to be human. Yeah. As parents and being around their children too. So I agree. I think that's like a pivotal thing. I also think what you're doing is important because there's so many parents, whether it's, a diagnosis they get, their child gets a diagnosis, and there's 12 different people that you have to contact. Yeah. And it's not always easy to do themselves.
And that help isn't accessible either. Like, I wish that my services were just funded by public health, but they're not, right? And as much as people they can submit my invoices if they've got extended coverage, but if they don't, that's out of pocket. And that's crazy, and I hope there are more positions like this that are in public health. But at the moment, anyone who's got a similar job to what I'm doing is doing so much and sometimes they're doing something that's outside of that job description too, right? Because the health system is just in survival mode right now.
And parents are so good about it too, like they really are, but there is that overlap that would be really, really helpful. Because it does take time to find someone that fits you. Even a therapist is the hardest thing to find when you're not maybe going through a public service and you're doing it immediately. I've experienced that too, and it took me a while because there's also that trust value. You don't want it to be a really terrible experience at first. It's already hard enough to go and get the help. I think having more conversation about this, but I do think that you have like a point. It would be nice to have that middle overlap. Like, you've got the recommendations or the information from like the doctor, the physician, the OB, and then you go into this next person that just helps you get that set up. Yeah. And maybe tells you how hard certain things are going to be or how lengthy it's going to be, because that's also something that's not always said. Yes. And then they can kind of, the rest would be on them, right? Unless you're able to find a navigator or afford a private person like yourself that can do that. So,
yeah. I know some health systems have like these care coordinators, but as far as I know, ours does not. Not yet, anyways.
Not yet, but it is a really good idea because the demand would be very high.
Yes.
And there's a message of hope that you would like others to hear, what would that be?
I would say that as much as you feel like you need to be able to do this all by yourself and it feels like a personal issue, I just want people to know that it is not something that you are supposed to do on your own. You're not meant to do this alone. And just because we've been living in a world where it feels like mental health is an individual issue, if you can break out of that and decide that it's not just your responsibility, it starts to feel a lot lighter. The responsibility of that gets a lot lighter once you start reaching out to people.